Hey guys, Carl from Purple Misplace. 2024 was a heck of a year for gaming. According to BG Stats, looking only at my solo gaming because that's what we're focused on today, I had 257 plays of 85 different games, 77 of which were new to me. Now there are probably a couple of other small things that I forgot to record or that were prototypes so I didn't really put them in there. And there were also multiplayer games that I'm not including in there at all. But 77 new games to me, including both prototypes that I previewed for crowdfunding, as well as games that have been published that I did get to dig into for reviews and then just for fun as well. Not everything came to the channel. Some of it will in the future. Most of it, or much of it, has already. So what I'm going to do this year for my top video of the year is I'm looking at games that were new to me in 2024. Not necessarily new to the world in 2024. They didn't have to come out or be released in 2024, but they were new to me this year. And then I'm going to split into two different categories because I do quite a bit of previewing on this channel. So I want to do my top 10 previews or sort of crowdfunded games of the year and my top 10 games that have been released either before I reviewed them on the channel or having since covered them on crowdfunding have now been released since then. And I'll do a top 10 of those currently available published games as well. So top 10 previewed games that still have yet to come out, and top 10 games, whether previewed or reviewed, that have already come out as of the recording of this video, meaning as of the end of 2024. But before I get into either of those two lists, you'll see some games on the shelves behind me. There are a couple of honorable mentions I want to talk about that didn't get put on the list for a variety of different reasons. The first one you'll see here right behind me, Star Trek Captain's Chair, would absolutely be on my list of published games. But it is not a crowdfunded game. It is not an official sort of prototype preview. I did just get an early release copy of the game and it should be coming out really, really soon, but it didn't feel right to put it on my list of games new to me in 2024 if it wasn't a sort of preview from 2024 and it's also not a retail release in 2024. But I've been loving this. I did a quick video already of a playthrough of the solo botless mode. I will have another video coming soon with the solo AI mode and my final thoughts on the game. But I've been playing this a ton and I've been really, really, really enjoying it. So expect a positive review, but a whole lot more detailed review from me when that hits. Next, you'll see here behind me, 7th Citadel. This is the follow-up to 7th Continent from Serious Pulp. I was a big fan of 7th Continent. I love the exploration aspect of it. I love the card play of it. But ultimately it became very grindy, very survival focused, and I wanted more of a narrative adventure exploration kind of game. So I was hearing that that is what this one is offering, and boy, is it doing so. They fixed pretty much anything that bothered me with the original, and this one, again, would join my list this year. It was new to me in 2024, and I have played it, but I haven't really played enough of it yet to rank. I've played through the first tutorial sort of scenario and the first kind of chapter of one of the 3 scenarios in the box. 3? 2? Sorry, I don't remember right off my top of my head right now, but I've only played through, again, the tutorial and 1 chapter of one of the scenarios in the box, so I didn't feel it fair to put it on my list yet because I don't really have enough experience with the game yet to truthfully tell you how I feel about it or how I will feel about it after I've played some more, because as I mentioned, 7th Continent did sort of decrease a little bit in feeling as I played it just because it got more and more grindy and less explorative, adventure-y fun for me. I don't expect that to happen with this one, but I don't want to put it on the list until I feel more about it. So I might sneak it onto my 2025 list or at least bring it back up as another honorable mention next year to sort of talk more about it when that happens. Over here on the shelf behind me, you'll see a couple of little things. One of them is Fliptown. Now, Fliptown I covered last year, was one of my games, one of my top games of the year. This year I covered this little yellow box in front of it, which is the Lone Gun solo campaign expansion, and I loved it. And this would absolutely be very, very, very high on my list this year. But since the game itself has already been on a list, And this is just a small expansion for it. I didn't want to put it on the list, but I did want to point it out here because I did have a blast with this expansion. It really, really does kick the game up one more level, throwing in, sort of forcing you to think about the game from different directions, trying different things, scoring in different ways. I really enjoyed that, and if you do enjoy Flip Town, definitely check that one out. Now, hiding back behind that, you will see Dale of Merchants. This is not a soloable game. This is a game that was new to me this year. Was new to me this year because I introduced it to a class that I'm teaching at my school, or an after-school program at my school. And I used it to teach deck building mechanisms to my students. And I really enjoyed what this does with deck building, because this is a deck builder that's not about scoring points, but more about unique and interesting sort of manipulation of cards, because every card you have in your hand can be spent to buy new things from market, and can also be played to have some kind of unique effect for whatever sort of suit that card is. There are a variety of different animal suits in the game, and every time you play with a different mix of animals, and each different kind of suit has a different style of action, whether it's take that or sort of wild card actions or rolling dice to have some random effect happen, and so on. But then ultimately the goal of the game is you're trying to build sort of sets of cards that total up to increasing value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And when you've built out 8 of these sets, you instantly win the game. So it's a race game trying to build sets of exactly value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in that order. And each set must include, unless you have a special ability, must include only cards of a specific suit or animal in that set. So it's a really cool set collection race game that is fueled by a pure deck building mechanism, and I really enjoyed what I saw. Now you're wondering why this is on the shelf if it's not solo. Well, that's why it's an honorable mention. They are currently play testing a new solo mode for this game, and I have just barely started playing around with it, and so far I'm really, really enjoying what I'm seeing. So I just wanted to kind of give a nod to this game because it is a whole lot of fun, and there is a solo mode in the works that looks to be pretty interesting. Expect to see that on a list in the future. Probably, definitely look for coverage of that solo mode coming to this channel at some point in the future. Now my final honorable mention is down here, sort of hiding behind me, and that is the Golpax's Secret expansion for Role Player Adventures. Just before I started recording this video today, I just finished the final chapter of that expansion for my first playthrough, and I had a blast. Spoilers, because there will be a video coming to this channel, but again, just like I did with the base game of that, I had a blast playing through this expansion. Just like Flip Town, though, Role Player Adventures was on a list before. It is just an expansion this time, so I don't want to put it on a list, but I did really enjoy it, and definitely expect a video coming to the channel soon of sort of focus on that particular expansion. But again, no expansions, nothing that I haven't played enough, nothing that hasn't either released or been on crowdfunding on these lists. So I wanted to point all of these things out. There's one last set of honorable mentions I want to put on this list, and that is because they're not really board games, but they fit in with a similar experience, and that is the Post-Curious puzzle boxes. If you've been watching my channel for a while, I've covered a bunch of these things already. I did Light in the Mist, and I previewed Morrison Game Factory last year. This year, I did a video for Emerald Flame, and I previewed their most recent one, The Ministry of Lost Things. Again, both Emerald Flame and Ministry of Lost Things were amazing experiences. I continue to love everything I play from Post Curious, and these absolutely belong on the list, but sort of mechanically, thematically, whatever, they didn't feel quite right to put on a list of top board games of the year, but they are top experiences of mine from this year, so I wanted to put those out there. All right, then we're going to start things off with my top 10 new to me games from crowdfunding in 2024 that I did preview on the channel that have not yet been published and released to the sort of public. And before I get into any of these lists, I just want to explain I absolutely continue to hate making lists. Every time I make a list, I instantly think, well, that shouldn't really be there. That's better than this. And then the next time I look at the list and say, no, maybe it should have been back where it was. Every time I think about these games, I put them in a different order. The order of these games is not really that important to me because of that very reason, that this order will change fairly dramatically every time I think about the games, because I start to remember specific things about specific games that makes me feel like that's better than this, but then that's also worse than that, and it's really hard for me to rank these things. So realistically, think of these as 10 games that I really enjoyed rather than an ordered listing of the games. But I will do them in order because there is something to the order that they are placed in. And I'm going to start at the bottom with number 10. All right, so my number 10 is already a little bit of a cheat, and that's because this was new to me in 2024. All of my plays of this game were in 2024, and my preview video for this game was also in 2024, but as I'm recording this video right now in January 2025, the crowdfunding campaign for this game has just gone live today, which means it is officially a 2025 crowdfunding campaign. But again, all of my coverage and all of my plays were in 2024, and it was new to me in 2024, so I'm going to let this stand. And this is Button Shy's newest game in their Simply Solo line, Hyperstar Run. If you're not familiar with this game, which you probably aren't because it's just launching today, Hyperstar Run is a very simple 18-card game, as most Button Shy games are. And you're basically trying to manipulate the cards in such a way that the symbols in your cards match the symbols on the cards on the table, and you're spending those symbols to sort of run through what is effectively a platformer video game. So you're controlling a character through this platformer video game, using the cards in your hand to activate the symbols on the cards, moving from card to card as you clear the challenges on each card. But in your first run or your second run of this set of cards, you're almost definitely not going to make it to the end because you won't have enough cards to activate all the symbols. As you're activating the symbols, so the cards that you've passed by will also then be usable to activate symbols, but even with that, you won't be able to finish likely. So what you need to do is you need these abilities on the cards to sort of reorder the cards in such a way that you set up combos that allow you to more efficiently move through the cards on successive runs. And you will have 4 runs to get through the level, clearing all of the cards in order to win. And again, in each round, you get more cards, more symbols in hand that will allow you to get further and further. And you'll also be reorganizing the board in such a way that will also more efficiently allow you to traverse each of these sort of scenes in the level, trying to get to the end. So very quick, very interesting sort of hand manipulation, order manipulation, action activation with symbols kind of a game from Button Shy. That is Hyperstar Run. Number 9 is another game, surprisingly, from Button Shy that I covered this year. And I say another game, but this one's a little bit of a cheat again because I'm not really saying a game here. But what I'm looking at is Mysticana. Mysticana is basically a new deck of cards from Button Shy. Again, from Button Shy means this is an 18-card deck of cards, except that Mysticana is not really an 18-card deck of cards. Mysticana is an 18-card core set of cards, and then each sort of game for this system, because it's really a system, it's kind of like having a deck of sort of standard playing cards and playing hearts or playing spades or playing all different kinds of games. With those cards, Mysticana is going to do the same thing. So you've got this core set of 18 cards, and then each sort of small expansion of about 6 cards ties in or plugs into that core set and becomes a game. So for my preview for this, I did preview 2 games, one of which was sort of okay, and one of which is this really cool sort of spatial puzzle where you were playing down cards that had to sort of match conditions on the cards that surrounded it in order to turn those over, and you had to sort of clear this pyramid of conditional goal cards as you were laying down the cards. And it was a whole lot of fun, but why this is on the list is not just for that game, but for the system in general. I've got 2 more games right now that I picked up at PAX Unplugged that do work in this system that I'm very excited to try out and bring to this channel. But really what excites me here is just this idea that Button Shy has created this sort of new deck of playing cards that can be used to play a variety of different games and can also inspire sort of at-home designers to try and come up with their own new 6-card adaptation to that deck of cards to create their own games. And so far I've been pretty happy with what I've seen, but even more excited about what could potentially be coming in the future for this one. Next up at number 8 is another small game. This one is a print and play only game, and that is 52 Realms Adventures. 52 Realms Adventures is basically a solo dungeon crawler game that plays out on a single sheet of paper, or more realistically, 2 sheets of paper, one which is the dungeon and one which represents your character. And all it requires to play are a couple of markers of any kind, could be pennies, could be tokens, could be cubes, whatever, plus a standard deck of playing cards. And using this deck of playing cards, you're going to traverse through the dungeon using cards representing equipment, which lets you attack and move and sort of perform your actions in the game, and or as items that will give you sort of special abilities as you trigger them moving through the dungeon. But you're moving through the dungeon, fighting off enemies, collecting new cards for your equipment and for your items, also collecting cards as loot whenever you defeat enemies or find loot in the dungeon, because ultimately, if you manage to escape the dungeon, defeating the boss or whatever the end goal is for the particular dungeon you're playing, that sort of collected loot and unused items will become your final score of the game. But it's a very, very clever system using a standard deck of cards to represent your equipment, to represent your items, to represent loot, to represent the enemies you're fighting against, to represent the enemies' sort of attacks against you, and how you sort of react to the attacks against you and attack back against the enemy. Anyway, it's a very simple but very clever system using only a standard deck of cards and 2 sheets of regular sized paper. Very easy to print and play, and a whole lot of fun, and also something that's going to be sort of slowly releasing new dungeons and new characters and so on, so it should have lots of variability moving forward as well. That was 52 Realms Adventures. Coming up at number 7 is a game that I have to say that I'm sometimes glad that Facebook advertising works the way that it works, because this is a game that I found purely through an ad on Facebook saying, hey, there's this new game coming about building music festival. And I'm a huge music festival kind of person, kind of fan, and I was really excited when I saw the ad for this, and I instantly reached out to the publisher. New publisher out of Mexico, Green Astra Games. Hadn't put anything else out. Very, very excited about learning more about this, and luckily I was able to get a prototype copy of this game to do a preview for this game. This is a game I was watching during its crowdfunding, crossing my fingers because it was sort of creeping and crawling along, and I was worried it wasn't going to fund. I had a whole lot of fun with this, and ultimately it did fund, and it did pass its mark quite a bit with a lot of extra stuff thrown in there, so I was very excited. But this game is a sort of action selection game where you are trying to build out a music festival in 2 ways. One, sort of building out the physical map or the physical area of the festival, getting food vendors and stores and stages and building out the physical area of the festival, while then also recruiting bands and slotting them into sort of a time schedule on the stages as you're building the stages on your sort of festival ground. And all of this is done through a very interesting slider system where there are several different types of actions, such as building a construction site or recruiting a band, and every time you take the action, you're sliding a slider up. And it looks really cool because they look like a sort of mixing board sliders that you're sliding. So you slide one of the sliders up. And why that's interesting is because when a slider reaches the top, that's when you sort of trigger the end of a round and move to the next round. And then that slider slides back down, and that's when the market for that particular action refreshes as well. So it's not just about picking the action you want to pick, it's also about sort of figuring out the timing. When do I want to push this up so that this refreshes and I get new stuff here? But also, as I do that, I'm progressing round to round to round, which is ultimately the timer of the game, which will cause the end of the game. So I have to be careful about which actions I'm taking, because that will also control the tempo of the game and how quickly or how slowly it will end. Anyway, I had a whole lot of fun with both the mechanisms and the theme in this game, and I can't wait to see the published version of it, the final sort of fulfilled version of this game, so I can dig into it and play it a whole lot more. Next up at number 6 is the first and only Japanese game on this list. From Uchibakoya, this is the game Sweetlands. Uchibakoya is a company I've followed for quite a while now. After several years ago, one of my ex-students told me about their game Amalfi, as a sort of suggestion for a Japanese game that played solo, because I'd been looking for Japanese solo games or soloable games for quite a while, and that one was recommended to me. And actually, I only recently got a chance to finally play that game, but it was enough to sort of put this company on my radar. And I've been following them for a while through games like Aqua Garden, through games like Biohack, most recently backing their game Ostia, which I still can't wait to finally get to try out. It should be shipping soon. But this game, Sweetlands, is their most recent crowdfunded campaign, and this is a huge, crunchy, heavy Euro-style game, sort of inspired by games like Terra Mystica. Set in this sort of cutesy world of confectionery, you're building out this sweet land, physically placing out tiles on a map of a variety of different sort of region types that give you different kinds of abilities based on the region types you have. But ultimately, the main action, the main sort of mechanism in this game is a unique action system, almost like worker placement, because you are blocking off spots as you place there. But you then have the ability to place again at that location if you pay more. And I say pay more because everything in this game is sort of driven by cards. When I place a piece out of space, I need to spend a card. And if I want to place at a space that somebody's already placed at, I need to spend more cards to do so. But those cards are also really powerful because each card has a unique sort of action that you can take by using that card as well, assuming that you can pay for whatever it is that you need to pay for to get that done. But then also through this action system, you're placing out locations, then you're building out sort of systems of roads to connect the locations together, to flip them over. And once they've sort of been flipped over and prepared, then you can build buildings on top of them, which are then scoring points as well for building buildings. There are different tracks associated with each of these buildings that will sort of give you stuff as you go, but also, most importantly, the scoring in this game is sort of completely driven by you. And what that means is as you're pushing up these tracks, you're increasing the value of specific things in the game. So if I'm doing lots of roads, I want to make sure I'm pushing up the track that's going to score lots of points for roads. If I'm placing out lots of location tiles, I want to drive up the track that gives me lots of points for location tiles. There's a variety of different ways to score points in this game. It's very much a point salad-y kind of Euro, but the point here is that you're controlling not only how you're scoring the points, but how much each of those different things scores. There's a whole lot more in here for me to dive into and get into, and I'm really, really excited to see this one finally come out as the completed version so I can dig into more of the variable characters and things that I have yet to try in this game. Next up at number 5 is a game, the third game now, from the new publisher Off the Page Games, from Jay Cormier and Sen-Foong Lim, that's focused on creating games from creator-owned comics, which already is super cool to me. The idea that these sort of really interesting comic IPs that may not be that well known are now getting new life through these board games and bringing in new eyes to the comic books, but also bringing in fans of the comic books into the games. I did cover Mind Management on my channel previously. There is their second game, Harrow County. I haven't had a chance to try it because the solo mode is just a small module in there, though I am still very interested to check it out. But now this third new game that I did cover this year, or this past year, on a preview for its crowdfunding campaign was Core of Discovery, based on the comic book series Manifest Destiny. This is a really unique cooperative survival deduction game, which is as crazy as it sounds, but it works out really, really well. You're sort of given a sort of set of missions that you need to accomplish during each round, with an overarching sort of mission you need to accomplish at the end, getting specific resources to match these things along the way. But the way that this is happening is what makes this game so unique, and what makes the deduction is you've got this sort of map, and on your turn you're going to sort of choose a location on that map and explore what is there. And if it's something good, you'll get the resource, and if it's something bad, you're going to get attacked. But it's not just a guessing game. There are logical rules about where things could be or where things might be, that if this thing is here and this thing is here, then there must be this other thing in one of these 3 locations. Or every line has this many of a specific type of thing. So if I know that I've cleared off half of that row and I haven't found it, then somewhere in that second half must be the thing that I'm looking for. And using these logic rules, you can sort of slowly piece together what it is that you need to find and how you can find it. But then also, you've got these sort of round by round mini missions that you have to think about, because you may want to sacrifice resources to take care of those so you don't get hurt, but sometimes it's worth taking damage or getting whatever the negative thing is so that you can hold on the resources to use for whatever the sort of game or scenario ending goal that you're working towards is as well. So it's this really cool balancing resource management thing, survival style game that has this really cool logical, almost minesweeper kind of searching a map while taking risks with some kind of logical deduction on top of it. I did get teased a little bit this year at PAX Unplugged. I stopped by to say hi, and they reminded me that in my original video, I said, this is a game that when I first started playing, I was kind of like, it's interesting, but I don't get it. And then the logic bit clicked, and it felt really cool to sort of puzzle my way through this logical deduction puzzle while playing this survival style co-op game on top of it. There are also a variety of different scenarios that sort of tie into each of the different story arcs in the comic that twist up the game's rules quite a bit and make things very fresh every time you play through. I haven't played the finalized version of this, but I did get to see a copy of the deluxe version at PAX Unplugged, and it looks gorgeous. The wooden board, the wooden sort of deduction searching map thing looked really, really cool. All of the small little resource pieces, everything looked amazing. I can't wait to get a copy of this game so I can dive back into it and try out some of the scenarios that I didn't get to preview. Again, this is Core of Discovery. All right, then number 4 on this list is one that just barely squeaks into this list because it is one that sort of has started fulfilling but hasn't hit USA yet and should be coming very, very shortly. And this is one that's also a little bit surprising that it is a solo-friendly game because it is a trick-taking game. And that is Power Vacuum from Keen Bean Studio. I covered this on my channel last year, and it's a very unique and interesting trick-taking game because there's a couple of fun things going on. First, all of the cards are suited so that you can see the suit on the back of the card. So you can see, if, for example, in a multiplayer game, what everybody else at the table has in their hand. And you can sort of predict what the cards are, but you have no idea what the values of each card are. And I say sort of predict because there's an additional suit, a trump suit, or a sort of super trump suit that is not marked on the back. It's disguised as the normal suits. So you can't see when somebody has that suit. And I say it's a super trump because that trump suit will only win if it's played against the regular trump suit, which is the red suit. So you've got this ability to sort of sneakily play an additional sort of trump suit on top of things without people knowing you're going to, because that color isn't shown on the back of the card. So already it's trick-taking with a little bit of information with trumps and super trumps, but more interestingly, there's a sort of board. And this game isn't necessarily all about winning tricks. If you win a trick, you do get the trick and you do score points for having won that trick. But then whoever played the lowest card on the round is going to be able to manipulate the sort of board that you're playing with. And this board is sort of a representation of all of the different suits in the game, or all of the different player colors in the game. And each player is going to have a color that they're trying to score based on their color, but then they're also trying to, well, they're given a card that has 2 different colors on it. And sometime during the round, they're going to set that card to has one side wants to be the most amount of power, and the other side wants to be the least amount of power. So whoever had that lowest number is going to move 1 power from one side to the other side of the 2 suits that are connected at that point on the board. And after doing that, they're going to take one end of that connection and move it somewhere else. So then whoever plays the lowest card on the next turn is going to move 1 power in either direction across that new connection. And at the end of a round, you're going to check to see who has the most power, who has the least power. You score based on the power of your own color, but then you also score based on how you've played that card, which one has most, which one has least. And also, playing that card can be played early in a round or late in a round, and depending on how long you wait to play it, the less points you're going to win, unless you wait all the way to the end and sort of push your luck. And if you wait all the way till just at the end of the round and that card is revealed, if you're perfect, means if you've predicted the max and the sort of highest color and the lowest color, then you get extra points. And it's this sort of layering on top of winning tricks is good, but also playing low cards is good to be able to manipulate this power, because the manipulation of power is how you score even more points in this game. And then on top of it all, there's a really cool solo AI system that really does allow you to play this game pretty well, similarly to the multiplayer game. Now, I can't say too much about the solo game now because I know there was quite a bit of development done, and I can't wait to see how it turned out in the final version. But Power Vacuum is a trick-taking game that gets me really excited, and I'm always excited to find new solo trick-taking games. All right, so here we go, moving into the top 3 new-to-me solo games on crowdfunding in 2024, at least the ones that I played and previewed. Number 3 is, and these could be in any kind of order, but I'm going with number 3 is Storyfold Wildwoods from Open Owl Studios. This is one that sort of came out of nowhere. They've been pushing and pushing with Stars of Ikarios and then Stone Saga and Mythwind kicked in. Now they just keep, now they're working on the re-implementation or sort of new version of Stars of Ikarios, and then suddenly on social media, I started seeing these posts for Storyfold Wildwoods. I said, what is this? I haven't heard anything about this. And I looked into it, and it's a solo-only narrative sort of storybook game. Like, what's going on? I reached out. I had to cover this. And boy, am I glad that I did, because this thing is gorgeous, and it's really fun, and the narrative it's telling is really sort of ethereal and beautiful and cool, and I don't know how to describe it except to say that it's a really cool action selection, dice-based, sort of dice skill check-based narrative adventure story, because it is a storybook. Every sort of chapter, every sort of scenario or scene that you're playing is the next page in a story. And on that page, there are a series of different events that you need to clear through skill checks that are dice-based skill checks. But the way that you're manipulating and interacting with this game is a series of, I believe, 5 action cards, all of which do different things: fighting off enemies, activating these stories, sort of giving you boosts to make it easier to activate stories, healing yourself, and so on, and lighting. Light is an important thing here, because light and shadow is sort of a big play into the narrative of this game. But you're using these 5 cards, and what makes it interesting is there's this sort of river. There's a line of cards on the board, and each card is placed beneath a number that tells you the sort of minimum value you need to roll on a die to pass the skill check of that action, which means you can choose different actions to try and attempt, but those may have a higher sort of threshold that you need to cross in order to activate that action. But every time you take an action, it slides to the end of the row, which means then that the other ones are all going to slide up, becoming easier to get done. So it's this real idea of sort of manipulating these and playing with them to get them in the right order, to take the actions at the times when they're cheapest. But again, you can't take the same action twice in a row, because it's going to slide to the end and either get really expensive to succeed or not even be able to be activated at all. Because along the way, there are also enemies that are coming into this same river, gumming up the works, blocking the slots where your cards might go. And those enemies are also slowly increasing this sort of shadow threat tracker. And if that gets to the center before your light gets there, that triggers the end of whatever's happening in that scene as well. So it's this cool sort of crisis management, skill check, very interesting card manipulation, action selection, very heavily narrative, gorgeous, gorgeous artwork, really, really fun solo adventure narrative campaign game. And I can't wait to play more than the first chapter that I got to preview. Moving up to number 2 is a game from a company that you can likely expect to see somewhere on a list like this when they do crowdfunding. And that is the newest game from Final Frontier Studios, which happens to be a studio that I tend to really, really love, with games like Merchant's Cove and Coloma. But this is their newest game, and also their biggest game, and also their heaviest game, and that was The Sixth Realm. The Sixth Realm is a very, very interesting, heavy Euro action selection game that has no cards and no dice, which was mind-blowing to me when I first saw it. It's an action selection game that uses this interesting sort of rotation wheel. And the rotation every turn basically tells you which of the, I don't remember how many actions there are, but which of the various actions you are allowed to take. And you'll always have one you can take for free and then two adjacent actions that you can spend additional resources in order to take. And when I say action, these actions are actually different regions of the board. And in each of those regions, you're sort of playing a different game. There's one where you're sort of moving space by space through a dungeon, collecting things. There's a region where you're sort of building out a polyomino puzzle. It's been a while since I played it, but there's a variety of different kinds of regions that have different sort of mechanisms that tie into them that all work off of this sort of action selection system. But on top of that, it really matters that you're doing a sort of resource management puzzle as well, because the resources are what you're going to be spending to be able to take the actions that are the secondary actions, but also to be able to take the actions themselves. Because you've sort of got an action economy system that you have a certain amount of points to spend on the action that's triggered, and you can sort of level that up throughout the game, but you can also spend resources to temporarily, for a single turn, increase that economy for that particular action on that turn so that you can make better use out of that specific location on the board and that specific type of action on the board. So there's a whole lot of different sort of pathways you can focus on, different ways that you can play this game, focusing heavily on one color, diversifying on a couple of colors, but your player board has a variety of different, I don't want to say tech trees, but different ways that you can sort of build up on it, aiming to get different kinds of scoring goals and different ways that you can score throughout the game. I know I'm not doing the greatest job of explaining this because there is a whole lot going on in this game, but it's very interesting. And again, really cool to see a big, heavy Euro that has no cards and no dice. I had a blast with this game. I can't wait to dive back into it and also try out the expansion when it does fulfill. Again, I have covered all of these games on video, so if you want to go check out the videos for these, I will leave links to them all down below in the description. Definitely check this one out if you're a fan of big, heavy Euro games. I'm a big fan of this game, and again, I can't wait. That is The Sixth Realm. All right, so here we go with my #1 favorite new-to-me game from crowdfunding that I previewed in 2024. This is a game that I saw hype for all over the place. Not this past year at PAX Unplugged, but the year before was the first time I actually saw the game. I didn't get a chance to try it then, but I just saw it in action and it looked really pretty. It looked very elegant. This is a huge, crunchy Euro-style game, and that is Galactic Cruise from Kinson Key Games. This game is everything that a Lacerda game is without being a Lacerda. And what I mean by that is Lacerda games to me are always so mechanical and they look so cool, and I play them and they give me really interesting sort of thought processes and how I'm going to figure out how to most efficiently use the actions given to me to do the things that I need to do. But ultimately it just feels like a mechanical puzzle. This game sort of takes that idea of this heavy, crunchy Euro with lots of options and lots of interconnectivity, but throws in a theme on it that makes everything make complete and total sense, and everything sort of just flows in a way that, say, for example, Viticulture did for the more medium weight sort of worker placement style game, that this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, because that's what you need to do to produce wine. In this case, we are sort of galactic travel agents building out rocket travel experiences through a space with a variety of different sort of levels in the rocket ship that offer a variety of different kind of activities you can do while you're on your cruise. Different locations you can stop off along the way, but you need to sort of but sort of advertise and bring in the right kinds of people that will use the kinds of things that you've put into your rocket. But ultimately, the way that this game works is it's kind of a worker placement game. I mean, I guess it is a worker placement game, but each of the spaces that you're placing out on has two actions on it, a top action and a bottom action, and those are randomized every time you play the game. So right off the bat, variability is great because the locations that you're placing your workers to activate are not the same every time you play the game. But more than that, When you place your worker, you're going to activate the 2 things at your location, but you don't have to. There are sort of these tokens that you're placing out on the board that connect to other locations. And as long as you can make a connection from where you place to another location that has an action you want to take, you can take one action from your location and one action from another location that's connected to you. And you get this ability to sort of build up to take these more and more complicated groupings or pairings of the different kinds of actions you need to get. So like spending resources to buy rockets, spending resources to add sort of attractions in your rockets, spending resources, spending money to advertise, to get people to join your cruise, launching your cruise, making sure you have enough fuel, enough oxygen to launch the cruise. But then on your own player board, you're sort of upgrading things to give yourself new abilities, to give you more space to store the resources you need to spend to go out on these cruises and to build these new rockets. And then there are cards that you can collect that do a variety of different things that sort of tweak and bend and break the rules in all different kinds of ways. Really, really, really clever, really sort of detailed in the right way, meaning there are lots of different things you can try and lots of different things you can do, but all of them make sense because they all connect to each other in a way that sort of narratively makes sense as a galactic cruise company creating these ships that go off into space on tours. I had a blast with this game. It's gorgeous. I saw the finalized version of this at PAX Unplugged this year, and it looks even more gorgeous. They've held nothing back in this game. I cannot wait to try out the expansions for this one. It's very likely you will see another video on this channel with some of the expansion material thrown in there. This is easily my top crowdfunded game from 2024. All right, so now transitioning from crowdfunding into games that have been published, that are available at retail, or at least at retail that have bought them from potential previous Kickstarters. These should all be at least somewhat available to you, and I put an asterisk on that because some of these are Japanese games. So there may be a language barrier, they may be a little bit harder to find, but they are all available to you. So with that caveat, let's go ahead and get into this list. I am going to sort of run through quickly because I don't want to spend too much time. I don't want this video to get too incredibly long, but I do want to give you some good idea of what those games are, but they all have been covered on this channel or will be soon if they haven't yet. So you can go check out the videos for a lengthier explanation for all of these games. So starting off at the bottom, not really the bottom because it's still top 10, but number 10 is Paperback Adventures from Fowers Games. This is a game that I've been wanting to get into for quite a while because I actually did do a little bit of play testing on this game before it was on crowdfunding. And this is a really interesting one because, well, doubly interesting one because first, Fowers Games created a game called Paperback, which was a sort of twist on Dominion, but rather than just Dominion deck building, it was Dominion deck building where you were trying to spell words with your cards, and the cards that you were buying were actually letters that you were going to use to spell words later in future rounds. And I really, really enjoyed what they did with that. So when they announced Paperback Adventures as a solo-only, although I think it may be cooperative possibility now, solo-only deck building game in the Paperback universe, except now it's a sort of roguelite battle game, meaning I'm fighting off against enemies using this sort of paperback word spelling system. Except now I'm not just trying to spell a word. Every card that I'm using to spell words has sort of things on both sides of the card. And if I lean all of the cards one way when I spell the words, I'll get some set of abilities. And if I lean them all the other way when I play the cards, I'll get some other set of abilities, usually one side being attack focused and one side being defensive focused. But I have to play out letters not just to spell the word, but to make sure that the words I'm spelling give me the attack that I need, or give me the defense that I need, or give me sort of energy that I can use on special abilities on a later turn to do whatever it is that I need to do to kill off the enemy and protect myself along the way. Now, it's not really a deck building game this time because you're not adding cards every time, but it is a roguelite deck builder, and what that means is sort of after you defeat every boss, you're mixing up your deck, either swapping out cards or adding cards, getting new items, getting new abilities that you can trigger based on the things that you're doing, upgrading cards that you have to sort of the opposite side of the card that upgrades or beefs up the abilities that were on those cards. Just a really interesting game that plays off of that spelling card game concept, but then also throws in this idea of splaying left and right to activate different abilities, also with the top card of your word in either direction, triggering some kind of major ability and being removed from that game for the round or for that battle, which means your hand size is slowly dwindling and dwindling, so it's getting even more difficult to do the things that you need to do. I had a whole lot of fun with this, with 3 different characters, and from what I understand, more coming in the future. Quite a bit of variability in how this one plays every time you get it to the table. Lots of different enemies with lots of different sort of attack styles, and even sometimes unique ways that they need to be defended against or taken out. Whole lots of variability in this game, lots and lots of fun. I enjoyed this quite a bit. Paperback Adventures. Number 9 is a sort of game system rather than just a single game, and that is Final Girl from Van Ryder Games. This is one that I've been hearing about for quite a while, but it sort of spins off of their old hostage negotiator system, and I only played that once or twice, but I just really couldn't get into it. It felt too random to me, and it just didn't feel like something I cared about. But I kept hearing so many good things about Final Girl, and people kept pushing me to try it out. And I'm very glad that I finally got a chance to try it out in 2024 because I really, really do enjoy what's going on here. Now, I have played 2 of the sets so far, the one that's sort of themed off of Friday the 13th, and the one that's sort of themed off of Nightmare on Elm Street. The Friday the 13th one is sort of the straightforward one, and that is basically just a person or a killer wandering around a camp taking people out, and you sort of need to power yourself up strong enough with items and so on to take out the killer. The Nightmare on Elm Street one switches things up a bit because now you're in a neighborhood, but you have to sort of ask for permission to go inside houses, and you have to sort of deal with this sleep and awake system where you can only hit the killer when you're asleep, and you can only help the victims when you're awake. And it's really, really interesting additional sort of thematic layer added onto the game. And I did enjoy the first sort of Friday the 13th version, Camp Happy Trails, when I played it. But when I did finally switch over to the Maple Lane Nightmare on Elm Street version of the game and saw how things could be switched up and more thematic and sort of pushed me to think about things in a more directed kind of way is when I did start enjoying this game even more. Because what I didn't love so much about Hostage Negotiator is I never really felt like I knew what I was doing. And then when I did, I would roll the dice, and half the time it didn't work anyway. This time, because of the theming, because of the story, the narrative in the game, it does sort of drive me to think about things in a more focused way. And also the sort of failures in this game also work more thematically because it's the sort of tension in the horror movie when you're rooting for the final girl to sort of stand up against the killer and take them out, and things just keep going wrong. And it feels good even when things are going bad. So thematically, I'm loving this one. There are a ton of different sets for this, and I'm looking forward to digging into more of them because I want to see more how the sort of different themes manipulate and change up the rules and the style of the way that the game plays each time. Number 7 is the first Japanese game on this list, and unfortunately currently is not available in English, but I have done a video on it, and Google Translate does a pretty good job if you don't know Japanese. But anyway, this is Quant from Arclight Games and designer Pawn. This is a sort of spiritual successor to his small card game, Sheffy, but this is a very interesting crisis management, solo only, but with a 2 to 3 player co-op variant included as well, where you are sort of trying to prevent these invading bug creatures from taking over all of these different cities of the world, playing out different cards along the way. When I say playing out cards, though, that's what makes this game so interesting. The entire game plays out with a deck of cards. And basically the overarching idea is you need to play through that deck of cards 3 times and survive through all 3 plays of that deck of cards. And inside that deck of cards, there are sort of 2 types of cards. One type of cards that sort of helps the creatures proliferate and take over the city, and one set of cards that helps you fight back against the creatures. But if you're defeating creatures of your sort of current power level or higher, which isn't possible unless you have a specific card that lets you attack higher, your power level is growing, allowing you to kill stronger and stronger creatures, because the creatures will grow as the game progresses. But not just grow, these creatures are also combining. So if there are 3 level 1 creatures in a city, they will combine to create a level 3 creature. If there are 3 level 3s and 1 level 1 or 4 level 3s, they will combine to form a 10 level or level 10 creature. So this combination is going to be important because each city can only hold a certain physical number of cards in that city. And again, some of the cards you are playing out will spawn new creatures in the cities. So it's up to you to spawn creatures at the right time in the right places so that they combine to take up less space, and then you can attack them with the attack cards, killing them off, increasing your power level, and giving you the ability to attack further and further higher leveled creatures. But then some of the creatures have unique abilities, whereas some creatures will only allow you to attack them, effectively blocking any other level of creature in the city. There is a level of creature that will only allow you to kill one of them at a time, which means that if you've got a powerful attack that's supposed to take out 6 creatures and there's that kind of creature there, you can't take out more than one, and that's a wasted attack. Some of the creatures spawn other creatures when they come out. One of the creatures basically eliminates one of the locations in the city, allowing it to hold less cards there. So you're manipulating the creatures by actually placing them out yourself by playing cards, and then playing cards that get rid of them, and it's this balance of when do I grow, when do I move, when do I kill, what levels do I kill, how long can I sort of grow these creatures before I attack them to give myself more power creep or more power level growth throughout the game, and how do I simply survive losing only if 3 cities are overwhelmed by creatures. So you can lose a little bit along the way. You don't have to wipe everything out. The ultimate goal is survival to the end of 3 rounds. And this is a very unique twist on a card-driven crisis manipulation game that I've been having a whole lot of fun with. And I really would love to see an English language version of this at some point. Number 7 is another card-driven game that I sort of avoided for a while because I didn't know how I felt about this sort of bigger Euro-ish kind of game being basically a card game. It's basically cards only with a board that sort of holds the cards and moves the cards around for you, but it's at its heart a card game. And this is Distilled from Paverson Games. In this game, you're using your cards, well, you're drafting your cards by buying different ingredients from the market, combining those ingredients together to distill different spirits, and then aging them or not aging them, depending on the type of spirit, and selling them at market. But this is a really interesting resource management kind of game in which you're trying to get sort of the right ingredients to make the right spirits to match goals that you get along the way, increasing or sort of building out your distillery by hiring people to come work for you or buying different sort of tools and tech that you can use in your distillery to give you unique abilities. But it's got this really cool card system in which after you've got all the ingredients you need to distill a spirit, which means you have to have some kind of sugar, you have to have water, you have to have yeast, you're going to mix all the cards together after adding alcohol for each sugar you have in there. Mix all those cards together and you remove the top and bottom card from that sort of mini deck of cards that you've created. And whatever's left dictates the type of spirit that you're able to create based on the recipes you have available to you at that point. And this idea, this sort of push your luck of, I think I have enough stuff, but if I have to pull 2 cards out, I might not have that stuff anymore. And how much resource do I want to waste to make sure I have extra cards in there to make sure it goes through? Or how much am I willing to hold back and push my luck, crossing my fingers that what I need comes out at the end, is a very, very cool balancing system. And the theming here and all the different ways that you score points based on aging spirits, based on getting specific people and specific texts that allow you to sort of do different things to your spirits that you're distilling. The idea that you can start collecting bottles that work specifically. If you sell a specific kind of spirit in that bottle, it's worth more. And then if you collect bottles from different regions, or if you collect lots of bottles from a single region, that you get points for your bottle collection as well. I'm really enjoying all of the different things going on here, but more importantly, this one solo has a very unique solo mode in which you make this sort of double inverse pyramid of goal cards, and you're required to complete 1 goal at each level, and every time you complete a goal, it sort of flips over the 2 cards diagonally adjacent to that card. So you're kind of snaking up this tree of ever increasing goals as you're moving up, but then some of the goals have point values on them, and that dictates the sort of point threshold that you need to also pass in order to win the solo mode. It's a very clever way to put a solo mode into a game that is not an AI. It's pushing you to do things. It puts in very hard or very distinct goals that you need to achieve to win, but there's nothing else in the game playing against you except for a randomizer that removes cards from market just to keep the market refreshed. I think that this is a really cool way to do solo, and I'd love to see more solo games trying out this sort of botless but very heavily goal-focused solo modes moving forward. I'm a big fan of this game. I really want to try out the new Cask Strength expansion for this one. That is Distilled. Then coming in at number 6 is the expected button shy game on the list this year, and that is Aqua Rove, with a small mention of Rove Jr., which I'll talk about in just a second. But Aqua Rove and Rove Jr. are now sort of new iterations on the game Rove that they published the year before. And if you don't know Rove, you're basically controlling a Mars rover by manipulating these different modules on the board, changing their sort of spatial positioning by using action points on cards with sort of specific movement abilities, moving in a straight line until it hits something, jumping over something, moving diagonally, moving one space but pushing anything it's next to, etc., in order to move these modules into different shapes to sort of trigger the goal of that card, pulling out more cards, and after you've matched enough of these shapes or scored enough of these goals, you've successfully cleared the game. Now, Aqua Rove takes that system and sort of does the same thing, except that in the original Rove, the movement type or the movement style was dictated by the module you were moving, and the card dictated simply how many action points you had. So if I wanted to move the pink module, I had to move it a specific way. If I wanted to move the green module, I had to move it a specific way. Aqua Rove flips that on its head and puts all of the movement types on the card itself. So now it's telling you you can move any module you want, but you have to use this specific movement type for this turn if you play this card. So now it's not about focusing on specific modules and what they can do. It's focusing on specific movement types and which modules to move using that movement type to get the things done that you need to get done. And I appreciate the sort of more flexible openness of this because it does take a little bit of the crunchiness away from the puzzle, but it also twists the puzzle up so that you come at it from a slightly different kind of thought process. And it feels a whole lot better to me. I don't want to say better. It feels very different, and it does feel improved to me because, again, it feels a little bit less stressful, but still has that cool spatial puzzle, sort of spatial manipulation kind of thing going on. And I really, really enjoy both Rove and Aqua Rove. And now also Rove Jr. they've released for sort of a younger audience. Again, pulling back a little bit of the sort of the specific detail about how things move, giving a little bit more flexibility, just moving a specific color, a specific number of spaces, and so on. Less modules, less complicated shapes that you're trying to make. Both of these great games are wonderful additions to the sort of Rove family. I'm very excited to see if they come out with any more of these because I know they've got lots of games, say for example in the Sprawlopolis series of games. So now that Rove has Rove and Aqua Rove and Rove Jr., I'm very curious to see how this sort of manipulation of spatial modules on a table space continues to grow and evolve throughout sort of expansions and new versions of the game. All right, so moving into the top 5 with number 5 is a game that I hadn't really heard about. It was kind of come out of nowhere. I was looking for a game for my after-school game class for my students to show off a bag building mechanism. We already had Quacks of Quedlinburg, but I like to do 2 games of a specific mechanism, and the other one I had was Orleans, and I tried that with one group of students, and it didn't really work because it was quite a bit too complicated. And so searching on the internet, looking for another bag builder, I stumbled upon Life of the Amazonia. This was interesting to me because it sort of mixed bag building with these sort of spatial puzzle of Cascadia. And what that means is Cascadia, if you're not familiar with it, you're sort of taking landscape tiles and putting them together in a specific way with animals on top of those, trying to build different kinds of shapes and patterns depending on the animals or the landscapes that you're placing down. And that sort of transition or carries over into this game, Life of the Amazonia, by Bad Comet Games. Because in this one, you're also building out a sort of network of different kinds of land types. But in this one, on top of that, you're placing out animals in different ways based on sort of size of animal and types of landscape that the animal's allowed to be placed in. And again, just like Cascadia, each of these animals has unique scoring conditions every time you play the game. But on top of just drafting tiles and placing them out, this game adds in this sort of bag building economy kind of system where you're building up a bag full of different kinds of resources that allow you to get animals, that allow you to place terrain tiles, that allow you to get cards that let you score in different ways or manipulate the board in different ways. And on your turn, you're pulling out a set number of resources from your bag and using them to take the various different actions, including buying or upgrading to higher valued chips that you can pull out in future rounds. So tying together this cool sort of bag building economy a la something like Orleans to this sort of spatial puzzler a la Cascadia really made for an interesting system together, and one that I'm very happy that I stumbled upon because this was a little bit lesser known to me and a very, very cool game. If there is anything small to complain about, the quality of the sort of standard punch board in this game is a little bit sad, but the game itself more than makes up for it, and I strongly recommend checking it out if you're a fan of bag builders and or sort of spatial tile laying kinds of games. At number 4 is one that's going to be a little bit of a spoiler because I have recorded the video but I haven't posted it yet. It will be up in the next few weeks. This is another game from Japan that is going to be a little tricky to get your hands on and unfortunately is not available in English, but with a Google Translate lens and or watching my video for it, you should pretty much be able to figure out how the game works. And this is Alice's Time Labyrinth from Komainu Games, which is a solo-only roguelite deck building game, all of which sounds really, really cool, and all of which works very, very well. Basically, you are trying to face off against a series of 4 baddies, basically, big bosses that you're trying to build up your deck to get to the level where you can hold off against them, but also have strong enough attacks that you can take them out, because in order to kill any of these, you have to kill them all in one hit. So you need to be able to have a hand of cards that clears the threshold of that particular enemy's health level. But at the beginning of the game, you have no attack, and you only have very limited cards, and most of them are useless. I think out of 10 cards, 4 of them, maybe 5 of them, do nothing. They're just completely useless cards. And the other give you sort of a purchasing power of 1 point. And using those cards, you're going to start buying more powerful cards that let you purchase stronger cards, or let you attack, or give you the ability to draw more cards, or give you the ability to sort of manipulate the value of the cards that you're playing, and so on. Building out your deck, trying to take out these enemies, and every time you destroy an enemy, the enemy rotates and becomes a relic that gives you some kind of unique ability. Plus, you also get a sort of special card added into your hand every time you defeat an enemy as well. Except that this is called Alice's Time Labyrinth, and the reason that is it's kind of a roguelike game. Eventually, as you're leveling up, as you're fighting these creatures during the process of leveling up, you're going to run out of cards. So you rewind time back to the beginning, all of the enemies come back to life, all of the relics you earn go away, all of the special cards you got go back, but the hand of cards or the deck of cards that you've created remains. So now you restart at the beginning with a slightly better deck of cards, and then you play through again, and eventually rewind time again, if you need to, playing through a third time with an even more leveled up deck of cards. And if by the end of the third playthrough you can defeat the 4th boss, you win the game, and if not, if you make it through 3 rounds and you still can't win, then you've lost the game. So it's this really interesting game of starting off with a very weak deck of cards, building up the deck of cards, adding in cards, culling off weaker cards, sort of focusing your cards on specific types of strategies because each enemy has specific special abilities or specific ways that they hurt you or specific ways that you have to hurt them. So you're building up your deck, focusing on these things, culling out the cards you don't need so that you've got this efficient deck to get these sort of big attack rounds to take out these enemies, resetting with a slightly better deck, trying to get even better, resetting now with your sort of ultimate deck and hopefully getting through all 4 of the bosses. I'm having a blast with this. It also includes a sort of 3-game campaign mode, extended mode, where you get extra additional sort of level ups, but the enemies are also leveling up every time you play the game, and you have to beat the game 3 times at slightly more difficult level each time you play through. Really, really cool system. I'd love to see an English language version of this, but again, with a little bit of a Google camera and a little bit of my video, you should probably likely be able to play this, although currently it's in between printings because the last one sold out real quick, much faster than he had expected it to. Again, really cool system. Keep an eye on this. Hope for an English language version. If not, I apologize, but it's a very, very, very interesting and very cool game to check out. At number 3 is a game that's gonna be a little bit tricky for me to talk about, and I apologize for this in advance because it's been a while since I played this game. I've been meaning to bring a video of this game to my channel for quite a while now, and every time I sit down to do it, I run out of time, and then I keep pushing it off, and it is coming very, very soon. I plan on recording it this week, but it has been quite a while since I played this game, so forgive me if I've forgotten details, but there will be a video with detail coming very, very soon to the channel. But anyway, this game is Scholars of the South Tigris from Garfield Games. This is now the 2nd game. There are 3 now. I haven't played the 3rd one yet, but it's coming, Inventors. But this is the 2nd game in the South Tigris series after Wayfarers of the South Tigris. And all of these games are sort of focused on dice placement in some way. Wayfarers worked okay for me. I enjoyed the core concepts in it. The solo mode wasn't all that great. But Scholars so far has been wowing me quite a bit, and it definitely deserves its place on this list. Again, it's a worker placement game in which you have a player board with a variety of different actions associated with slots on the board. And then from your hand, you're playing a card onto that slot, and onto your card, you're playing dice. And the dice that you're playing are going to be doing a couple of different things. First off, the dice have a value on them, and the dice are of a specific color. There are primary dice, red, yellow, blue, and then there are also sort of secondary combined dice of orange, green, and purple. And the colors, as well as the numbers, will do different things depending on the actions that you're taking. Where numbers will move you around on a track more or will allow you to do specific things differently, and the colors will sort of dictate which of the things you're focused on, because the actions primarily in this game are you're trying to recruit translators for yourself, and ultimately you're paying translators gold in order to translate different scrolls in order to get specific things for yourselves. But the scrolls that you're translating are going to be in different guilds that have different colors. So in order to translate that scroll at the specific guild, you need to be able to have dice of that color, in which case the guilds are all orange, green, and purple. Means it's very difficult to get those secondary colored dice. You generally have to sort of combine things in order to get to that scroll, in order to then pay a variety of translators, because this is another interesting piece of this, is that each translator has specific languages they can translate. So to go from one language to another, you may have to go through 2 or 3 different translators, translating from A to B, and then B to C, and then C to D, and finally to E that you were trying to get to, paying each translator along the way. But these scrolls are then going to give you different kinds of scoring at the end of the game as well. But I mentioned you're going to have these secondary colors to get these things done. Well, in order to do that, you're going to have dice of 2 different colors. So if I mix a red die and a blue die together, I'm going to get a purple die, or I'm going to get a purple effect, basically. But most of the dice, or at least at the beginning of the game, many of the dice are white. They have no color. So there's also workers that you can place. It's not a worker placement game. It is a dice placement game, but you can place workers with the dice. And if you place say, for example, a matching colored worker with the die, you're going to boost the value of that die. But if you place a different color with that die, you're going to change that die into whatever color worker you've placed down. So if I place 2 white dice, I could then place a yellow worker and a red worker to turn it into a yellow die and a red die and combine that to make an orange die to do whatever I need to do to get orange stuff done. So you're trying to get scrolls to these different temples, going to these temples using these secondary colored dice, and then using your translators to translate these scrolls and score points based on the language that you're scoring or that you're translating. But on top of that, there's this really cool rainbow colored track basically. Each color, both primary and secondary, has a track in the middle of the board that you can also spend actions on by playing dice matching the color of the track you're going to drive up sort of your level of that specific track. And each track is going to do different things. It's going to score points. It's going to give you money. It's going to give you gold. It's going to give you more dice. It's going to give you all different kinds of things. But most of the spaces on those tracks don't do anything unless they're activated. So you're driving your level of these tracks up, and then you're passing. After you've placed out all your dice, you need to pass to get your dice back and start fresh again. Every time you pass, at the bottom of all of the cards you played into your tableau, there is a specific tag for one of those colored tracks that will trigger. So as you're taking your actions by placing out dice, I said that you have to place a card and then place dice on it. The card that you've played is going to dictate what kinds of actions happen during that pass round. On top of all of this, the solo mode in this works very well. It feels quite a bit more like a player than Wayfarers did. You can track them, you can block them, you can sort of predict what the things are that they're going to do. I'm missing a lot of stuff here, as I said, because I haven't played in a long time, but there will be a fresh video coming soon with a whole lot more detail and a full playthrough, so look for that. But this is Scholars of the South Tigris. Then at number 2, is the newest version of a game that I've enjoyed for quite a while. This is the first game that finally got me into deck building. I played Dominion, I played Ascension, I played a couple of other deck building games back in the day, and I just didn't like any of them. I didn't get it. I didn't understand why people were so excited about it. And then I played Clank from Direwolf. Clank is a deck building game that adds a board. First off, that was what sort of pulled me in and said, hey, wait, this isn't just deck building. This is using deck building to do something else. And what that meant to me was that it gave me focus. I think what I didn't like about deck building so much was there were so many options and I had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't really care about, should I be focused on points, should I be focused on more money spending abilities, should I be focused on drawing more cards. I didn't really care and I didn't really know. But Clank added a map, and the point of Clank, if you've never played any of the Clank games, is that you're building up a deck of cards. And each of your cards is going to allow you to have sort of points to buy new cards, have movement value to move around on the map, have attack value to fight off enemies on the board. But you're basically trying to build a deck that will allow you to move through an underground sort of dungeon area from room to room, ultimately picking up an artifact and then bringing that artifact safely back to the starting point in order to score the most points. Now I say in order to score the most points because you don't really need to make it all the way back. If you make it most of the way back, you'll score points. If you make it less than most of the way back, it means you're still stuck down in the underworld. When you die, you're dead and you score 0. So there's a bit of a push your luck timing aspect to it as well, because throughout the game, some of the cards will cause clank. And what that means is you have to put your own cubes into a pool. And then some of the cards, when they get placed into the market row where you're getting cards from, will have a dragon on them. And when you see a dragon, you're going to put all of the cards in the clank area into a bag, and you're going to pull cubes from that bag equal to whatever sort of level you're at that point. And every cube of your own color that gets pulled is 1 damage you take. And if you take a certain number of damage, you will die. So you need to get in, get an artifact, and get out before you die. And it's this really interesting idea and really cool use of deck building because it really did help me focus on, okay, I need this much money to buy this much stuff, but then I also need this much movement so I can get around fast and don't die in the dungeon. But I also need some attack so that I can fight some enemies to get some more stuff while I'm down there, but also some of the pathways you move through, you need to be able to fight enemies so you don't get hurt as you walk through them. Also, there's this other sort of mechanism of needing money to buy items that give you special abilities or allow you to use special paths that would otherwise be blocked off to you, and so on. That's Clank. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Then came Clank in Space, which I'm not going to talk about here because this is not Clank in Space, but it added a bunch more stuff, and I enjoyed it even more because most importantly, it added that sort of Star Realms twist where certain cards have a certain suit, and if you play more cards of that same suit, you get extra abilities, and I thought that was really cool to sort of build these synergies in your hand. Then came Clank Legacy, which I did recently play through with some coworkers and had a blast with. That adds in a whole narrative story, expanding, changing map, different kinds of quests and goals and missions that you go on along the way, and all kinds of other little things that come out as sort of rules unlocks as you play. And now recently they've just released Clank Catacombs. And Clank Catacombs is my number 2 for 2024. It's a new twist on Clank. It's pretty much the same thing as Clank, but now it also includes a lot of the stuff that they've developed along the way in other games, including that idea of the synergies of different kinds of suits, including some of the different weird stuff that came out in Clank Legacy, but more importantly, the new piece is that there is no board. Everything is made up of modular tiles now, and when you start the game, there is no world. There's just a sort of starting space, and it really adds thematically that as you go down into the depths, you're exploring new uncharted territory, and you're turning over tiles and adding them to the board, sort of exploring along the way. So you have no perfect information. You have no idea what you're going to see until you do see it. So it adds this extra layer of sort of tactical decision making on, oh no, I found myself here. Now can I keep going? Now should I turn around? Now should I go this way? Now should I go that way? What's happening next? And it really adds a nice extra level of tactical decision, but also a little bit more of that push your luck. Because there's also things in the game that will cause these tiles to rotate, that will cause these tiles to move to different locations, that will cause these tiles to turn over and no longer be accessible. And it really, really adds to this super thematic flavor of you going through this weird dungeon and weird things happening to you as you're exploring. And I think this is easily the best version of the game, aside from maybe Clank Legacy just because it expands, and I'm very excited to see Legacy 2. I can't wait to try that out. But as far as a core game system that has its own variability and repetitive or ability to replay kind of game, this is absolutely my favorite version of Clank. And again, just like with Clank, which then became even better with Clank in Space, they now continue to have the solo campaign sort of mode in their app for the game. So I've only played the first scenario of this so far, and I want to dig in more, and I'm sure I will, and I hope to bring a video to the channel of it as well. But in the app, there's a narrative solo campaign that sort of tells you a little bit of a story, gives you some extra little goals that aren't in the main game of things that you need to do as a solo player because you don't have somebody you're playing against. It does sort of refresh the market. It does sort of trigger dragons when it's not your turn and so on. So it feels like there's stuff going on in the game even though there are no other players playing with you. I really love how these apps work, and I love that they continue to support it, and I really hope that they've never really supported expansion content in the app before, and now that Clank Catacombs has an app again and it's starting to get expansions, I really hope that they continue to keep up with the app as they're doing with things like Dune Imperium. Fingers crossed, but anyway, I'm very, very excited for this game, and it works very well solo with the app campaign. That is Clank Catacombs. And now my number 1 game new to me in 2024 is actually a game that could have been on either this list or the crowdfunding list, and that's because it did recently come back to crowdfunding for a reprint plus expansion campaign that just recently finished. But I actually covered the retail version of the game before the Kickstarter came out so that I could show it off before the Kickstarter came out. And that is another Japanese game, but this time available in English and hopefully available in even better English now with the reprint from this second campaign. That is Snow Planner from 14 Games, or Juyeon Games. I am very, very happy that I finally got a chance to play this game. I saw a lot about this in the past. I saw it in Japan, and I felt a little bit bad that I didn't pick it up last time I was in Japan, but I was lucky that a friend of mine locally had a copy of this game, so I was able to try it out and cover it before this new second campaign hit, and now I'm definitely getting everything I can from this second campaign. But Snow Planner is another worker placement, dice placement kind of game in which you're sort of managing a hotel at a ski resort, trying to build out the different rooms and different amenities in your resort, collecting resources and collecting sort of different activities and things at your resort to attract guests to your resort, but then not only attracting them to your resort, but making sure that they stay for multiple nights by making sure you have all of the amenities and all of the sort of requirements they need to feel comfortable enough to stay for multiple nights. But all of this is happening and all of this is playing out with a somewhat straightforward, but also not at all straightforward worker placement, dice placement system. And I say dice placement, but the dice in this game are never rolled. The value or the number of pips on the dice determines the sort of strength of the die that you're placing. And throughout the game, there are specific actions you can take to upgrade those dice to make them higher value. And that's meaningful because each location you go to is going to give you sort of a level of action based on the value of the die that you're placing there. So if you place higher value dice, it's likely that you're going to get better action or better stuff at the action that you're taking. There's also a really interesting location on the board that allows you to use a sort of temporary worker that is likely to be a higher value than the values you have. So instead of using your turn to upgrade your workers, you can instead take this other temporary worker that somebody else may have already upgraded on a previous round. But you're collecting resources to build up your hotel, you're collecting resources to upgrade your workers, you're placing out workers in a variety of different ways to get different guests to come to your hotel to score points along the way. There's a little bit of a spatial puzzle based on where the different sort of, I don't want to say rooms, but different kinds of amenities in your hotel get placed out in this sort of grid. And when you fill in rows and columns, you get things on there. There's different variable player characters you can start with that give you different abilities, and then even more different abilities once you fill in those window slots, that grid that I was talking about in specific patterns, adding more of that sort of spatial puzzle. And then there are event cards in the game, which make things even more exciting and fun because the event cards give you all kinds of abilities and twist the rules and break the rules in all kinds of really interesting and powerful ways, but often require lots of resources to play and also use actions to get and play as well. So that ties into that same sort of worker placement action selection thing, because when you place higher level value dice, you can play or can get more of those cards, and those cards are going to ultimately decide sort of how powerful you are in the game and how much stuff you can get done. So it's a really unique dice placement game that uses dice as values rather than rolls, and builds in this sort of spatial puzzle, resource management, variable player powers, multi-use, I don't want to say multi-use, but powerful, usable cards, action kind of cards. Lots of stuff going on here. There is now an expansion coming for this that I'm excited to see. And even more exciting, in addition to the solo mode what's already in the game, which is a whole lot of fun, they're also adding in now as an additional sort of mini expansion, a cooperative version of the game that I'm excited to see how it plays. I'm loving everything I've seen about this, and I can't wait to see more, and I can't wait to finally have my own copy of this game. Again, my #1 game of 2024 was Snow Planner. So there you got it. Top 20 games, 10 crowdfunding, 10 games that I published or were previously published or currently available in 2024, all of which were new to me, plus a couple of games hidden behind me or not so hidden behind me that were sort of honorable mentions. I had a whole lot of fun gaming in 2024. I've got some really fun stuff coming up on the channel, and I can't wait to see what else I discover moving through 2025. I look forward to doing this list for you again next year. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want to tell me about the games that I've mentioned, or ask me about the games that I've mentioned, or if you'd like to share some of your favorites from the year with me, please make sure to leave some comments down below. Otherwise, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, as always, I do ask that you like, subscribe, and click the bell icon below, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks.